please. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company. It's Monday night, so it is Connecting the World by Story. And last week, we looked at arts, mental health, and well-being. Now, actually, after my last night, I'm not sure about the advantage of the arts and mental health, because I was in the middle of putting a script together, and I finished it and sent to the person who was actually going to put it into script form. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and I changed my mind about it, and I couldn't get back to sleep. So, so I found myself typing out and emailing people in the middle of the night, and I'm just hoping it didn't go ding on their devices and wake them up. So it was obviously detrimental to my well-being, but probably good for my mental health. But right now, uh, let's let's get across to let's go across to, and I'm always getting the wrong bit of Ireland there, so I'm not even going to attempt to remember where you're based, Maria, because we know it's down south. We know it's down. We know where, as people used to say when I was hitchhiking, we'd walk into a bar in Derry, and they with a darts team from the Republic, and they'd go, 4 pints of Guinness on the slate. You're with the Republic men now. so, so we know we know you're down south. Uh, but but Maria, less less rattling on by me and more rattling on by you, because your rattling on is so much better.
Oh, John, it's a pure pleasure to be here. I've had such a great week storytelling, so I have. And I'm delighted to be invited back here to talk about my favorite subjects, how arts and stories and mental health and the health of the well-being are all tied in together. And I'm from the county of Cork in Ireland, which is down in the very
Yeah,
southern
and I was trying to remember where I did the festival. It was in Youghal.
in Youghal. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
great, great, great
Carry on,
place.
carry on.
I'm actually going to spell Youghal to confuse everybody. It's spelt Yaughal. So we have great fun, when people are asking us how to get to it because the different pronunciations are great fun. So that brings us back to our subject tonight. And I was really thinking about how I could nutshell it a little bit for this week. So last week, from my perspective, we looked at male mental health, and I'm a drama therapist, and I come under the umbrella of IACAT in Ireland, which is the Irish Association of Creative Arts Therapists. And I didn't mention those last week. And in the UK, it's BADTH, BADTH. So it's the British Association of Drama Therapy. Um, and the work is so much fun and excellent and so underrated. So I suppose to say that. And then my favorite tool in drama therapy is stories. And one of the areas of story that I find fascinating is zeitgeist. So, zeitgeist is the ghost of our time. For example, in the 1960s, the zeitgeist would have been make love, not war, and peace. And in the 80s, it would have been feed the world. And what is our zeitgeist now? Because if we look at our current zeitgeist, you're actually looking at the world shadow. And that can be the dark stuff, but it can also be the bright stuff. And we can learn from other eras and other times. And that's where this story comes from. So I often work with the elders in our population, and I'm very careful not to call them old, but the elders who have distilled wisdom. and now have the time to be able to give it to us. It's why we always loved going to our grandparents, because our parents are busy trying to make things happen. But grandparents can sit down and listen to your ramblings, a little bit like my ramblings now. So I love sitting at the feet of the elder population and finding out from them what are the wisdoms that we could be carrying into the world. And something that we've noticed in my city, and it's probably the same in your city, is that in the late 20th century, from 1980s on, say, the generations were getting more and more separated out from one another and boxed into different areas. So last week we saw how the young man suffered from not having men in his life that he could ask questions of or get directions from or find out what the boundaries were. So that was the science behind the story, if you like, but really it's just common sense stuff. And it's the same with our women. The young women used to always rely on the older women, and they would have great time sitting around the kitchen table. And I remember sitting under my granny's table and hearing great stories. And then if they had something important to discuss with one another, you would be shooed out of the room. And this story comes from that elder population. Moira had come to live in the city, and she didn't really know anybody. And she was really worried because she was completely on her own, and her daughter was starting in a new school. And at first, everything was perfect, everything was fine. They had great fun picking out curtains for the new house and deciding what kind of mat they'd have in front of the fire. And oh, to have a fireplace. It was heaven. And they even bought a little dog to join their family. And at first, Magella was doing really well at school. But then she began to become very withdrawn. She didn't want to tell her mother how her day was going. And her mother became worried about her. Over a weekend, she managed to find out from her daughter that she was being bullied in school, that she was being mocked for the old clothes that she would wear, that there was a hole in her cardigan because she had a habit of putting her thumb through all of the jumpers that she had. And her mother had thought that that was cute. And now, for that very thing that was so unique to Magella, she was being mocked. Of course, she went up to the school and the teacher said, look, there's not much we can do about it. If it comes under our eyes, we will. And we've had talks to everybody. But these days, everybody wants the latest runners. They want the best coat. Everything has to be brands. It usedn't be like that. It usedn't be like that, said Margaret. Why is it like that now? They said, we don't know, but we'd love to turn the clock back. She thought about that, and everybody that she met that day, she asked them the same question. Where's the good nature in our world gone? Where's our neighbourliness and the way we used to have one another's back? How come nobody says hello to one another anymore? And all the people, they said, you're right. And it's nice to be nice. The old saying started to come out. It's nice to be nice. It is nice to be nice. And she found, worried as she was, that if she smiled at people, that they always smiled back at her. And she was reminded of a poem by Spike Milligan when he said that smiling was like the flu, and it was something that we should all catch. Because if we smile at one another, nothing really changes, but you feel lighter in yourself. Eventually, she began to say to the old women who were sitting in their front gardens, because it was a beautiful summer that year. And they said, oh yeah, girl, sure they don't listen to us anymore. And she said, well, I'm listening. Tell me. And they said, So why is she being bullied, girl? Because we don't have an awful lot of money and we can't buy beautiful clothes every week. And she has a habit that she can't get out of putting her thumb through her jumper. And they tell her then that it's old and raggedy, even if it was only something that she'd gotten since that week. Ah, yeah, girl. You need to tell her about the sure what about it? Sure what about it, said Margaret. And already she was laughing. She said, come on, tell me what that is. And they said, well, back in the 1940s, we had the parcels coming from America and from England. Do you remember those? And she said, yeah, you know. Like she says, I remember my mother telling me about it. And she said, yeah, and all the neighbours would be looking out the window because some people got letters from America with dollars in them, but other people didn't. And some people got big boxes and other families were forgotten. So if something was delivered to someone's door and they came out and they were all style and they were giving it all that up and down the road, we'd just wait until they asked. And then if they'd say, what do you think about this? Beautiful from New York City. We'd say, sure, what about it? And as soon as we'd say, sure, what about it? They had two choices. They could boast more or they could get back in their box. And nobody likes a boaster. Oh my God, said Margaret, that makes me laugh out loud. She said, oh, but I don't think that would work in today's world. There ye go again, said the old women. What do you mean, said Margaret. There you go again, brushing off the old wisdom, saying it wouldn't work. Well, of course it won't work if you don't believe in it. It's not what you say, girl. It's how you say it and whether you believe it or not. Well, Margaret didn't know if she believed it. And they talked about it in the kitchen that night, herself and Magella. And they talked about it with her aunts and they talked about it on the phone. And somehow Magella took that into herself. And the next day, when a girl came up to her, you know, the ones with the high ponytails that were the fashion at the time, and said, Reba, €60, 'cause I'm worth it. She said, sure, what about it? And the girl had no answer and she was trying to think of an answer. And Magella just walked away. But that night, that girl was sat down by her mother and she was told all those things that we had to listen to. Do you remember all those things that were around when the Celtic tiger was roaring? You're worth it. We're a two-income family. Some people can't afford it, but we can, so why not treat ourselves? You know, all that stuff. And she came back the following day with it. Well, here's the magic of an old wisdom. The old wisdom had taken root in her heart and in her blood, and she wasn't going to give it up that easily. So when she was challenged the next day with the, yeah, because we're a two-income family, etc., 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 she just nodded with her hands folded. And at the end of all that, she said, because you're worth it. Because they saw you coming. And the girl said, what do you mean? She says, they saw you coming. You could get one in this colour and that colour and the other colour and still have enough money left over to go to the pictures. Because you're worth it. Because they saw you coming and you believed them. It was amazing that in that school, in a period of 2 weeks, they went from being brand conscious to seeing it as a badge of honour to wear the clothes from the local shops, done stores and pennies that didn't cost the earth. And that is why we should listen to the old wisdoms. So, and again, that was a story that came out of my work, and we had great fun making that story together, you know, and to me, it's full of truth. I love that story because it did have a huge effect on a working class school in Cork, and it was like they remembered who they were overnight. So,
Right. Fantastic. Fantastic, Maria. And it's wonderful. And I see Norman has joined us from Canada. Uh, Now, Norman, have you a story on theme tonight, or a bit of your practice, or are you just here to listen to everybody? And it's up to you.
Well, I'm here to listen for a little bit, and the story may walk into the situation for me. What was it you were saying about what kind of stories they're looking for?
Well, the theme tonight is art, arts in mental health and well-being, and the importance of it. And people, we're looking at people's practices. Maria, would you like to just repeat for Norman what your what your drama therapy
yeah.
practices and how you use storytelling in it? Just for the
Yes,
people that have just joined, because you said that right at the beginning.
I did. So I'm a drama therapist, Norman, but before that, I was a crisis manager, an operations manager in Europe for many years. And I found that a lot of the practices that we learned in crisis management in the corporate world could be applied in community also. But a lot of the wisdom was already there. It was just that with the division of the generations, you know, how we separate out the generations now. And it's really the first time that that's happening in Ireland, but there's templates for that because if we look at the States or if we look at other countries, we can see where people were boxed off. And in doing so, the wisdoms and experience that you would have learned, you know, from the older generations weren't valued or weren't passed on. And it was like, you know, putting a baby into a world that was already grown up and mistakes being made. So this story was gathered from my work with the elder population in Cork and made a huge difference to teenagers of Cork, in particular the female teenagers, because we looked at men last week, you know. So
Okay,
I came
I
from,
have a story then.
yeah.
Okay, now, yeah, and for those who want to hear more of Maria, she has got a half of Sunday, our Sunday evening, and the other half is a great friend of hers, a poet who would have been here tonight, except she's pulling a 12-hour shift on the front line.
Mhm.
That's Kathy
Kathy
Carr,
Carson, yeah.
brilliant poet. I'm really looking forward to that. So that's Sunday, and I'm leaving to them how they work out the program, whether they go backwards and forwards or do a half each. I don't care. It's they're just so brilliant. Um, but right now, last week, if you remember, we had Kelly Mussington on this, and she talked about how her life experience sort of built into her practice and what she's doing now, and it's up to people how much or how little they want to tell us about their life experience and how it affects what they're doing and in the arts and so forth. But I'm bringing on a great friend of mine. Uh, Another Suffolk boy, and uh, is Jody Lee, who's been doing performance poetry, but also doing loads of stuff outside beyond that. And so, thank you, Maria. We'll come back to you, and it's in the discussion at the end. But right now, we're going to move from Cork, County Cork, right in the south, to Bury St Edmunds in the east of England. That's kind of like Holyhead and just keep driving. uh, so, Jody, over to you. Please take us through whatever you want to tell us. Throw a couple of poems in, but just and put where it all is.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you, Maria. I actually have some nerves going on after you. I watched last week's one, and honestly, I love it. Love your story. You tell them so beautifully. I could listen to that all the time, and I love what you do. It's amazing. Yeah, my name's Jody Lee. I am a poet, and I am an addict as well, which is a lot of the birth of my poetry. It was used as a way to really manage my feelings, to sort a lot of things out while I was going through addiction and recovery. I'd become an addict at a really young age. I had quite a troubled childhood, and I loved writing. I always loved writing, and I always loved stories. I used to sit on the beanbag as a child and listen to the old storyteller cassettes. I don't know if anyone remembers, and they used to ding when you turn the page. And I particularly loved Hans Christian Andersen stories, by all of them off by heart I knew. That, like, really, even in those early days, was a form of escapism for me, you know, and I didn't understand at the time. I just loved them. And of course, as I grew older and started to have all these difficult feelings and coping mechanisms and became an addict, I used to write a lot of stories and poetry. Now, the way that helped me and is relevant, I think at the time I didn't really know. It was helping me to express myself, to get my feelings out, and to really deal with some of these difficult things, the anger, my self-destructive behavior, all this sort of stuff, the attachment issues. But it also helped me to connect to other people. And it wasn't until I started performing them I understood this. And I went through some real difficult times, especially with my dad in particular. My mum was really loving and caring, so I kind of had like a mixture of both. But my dad was an addict and a really, really troubled man. And I used to have a lot of difficult, intrusive thoughts about harming him. I really, really struggled with this. I had to go to counselling, and I sort of learned to come to terms with it, understanding that because I was powerless in the situation, of course I was going to have these thoughts about harming him. It was the only way I could take power back. And as I got older, you know, I learned to understand that, but I thought, well, I've still got all this anger, you know, what can I do with this? So I decided to write a poem. And I have to give a disclaimer that this poem isn't actually true. I did not do what happened in this poem. But I'd like to do a couple of poems for you, actually, but I'll do this one first because it's been a very profoundly moving poem. I think it was very cathartic for me when I wrote it, and it helps me understand my feelings. It helped me understand the reality of something like this and how that would make me feel if I played it out. But when I read it to other people, it really resonated with some people, and that was quite profound, having that. At first, I didn't know how to deal with it when people came up and said, oh, I went through this as well, because I was only 23, 24. But over time, I started to sort of soften up a bit about it and really chat to them and understand, yeah, there's lots of other people who went through this. So this is the poem. It's called 5 More Years. At 5, he lies on the floor, cowering. His father powers through the door, towering over him, devouring the fear that seeps through each pore in his skin. There's fear in his eye, and a look that asks why, but the rage in his father cannot be described. As the fear starts to rise, panic makes the room spin. Though the walls, they don't fall, they appear to close in. The way his dad wears his face is the scariest thing, for his lips never move and his eyes never blink as he swings, freeze, and fast forward. 5 years are spent. This boy is now age 10. A foot, maybe more, he has grown. He's unsure because his height makes no difference when curled in a ball on the floor. Then those footsteps evolve from the shouts and the yells. They ascend the stairs. He descends to hell. The door crashes open. The footsteps crash in. He's already broken. He's frozen. He's chosen to show no emotion, so he holds his tears in. Now he knows what is coming. He knows how it stings, but the thing that still stuns him, the thing that hurts him most within, is that those lips never move and those eyes never blink as he swings, freeze, And fast forward. Now at 15, growing used to the screams. His mothers are fearful, his father deceives. It repeats and repeats, it's the same every week. First he gets drunk and then starts on the drugs, and then he's no more than a bully, a thug, who preys on his wife and his son as he sees them as weak. At 15, this boy's bigger. I mean, he's the biggest he's been, but the fear of his father's still pulling his strings. Sometimes when he sleeps, he fights back in his dreams, and he wakes every time with maniacal grins. It troubles his heart that he's pleased by such things, but now stood in the dark, anger strikes up a spark. The fire has started, the fear has worn thin. So he stands, feeling tall, though his legs want to fall. He handles his weight as he waits for the swing, and he lifts up his face to his father's hard gaze and looks on amazed as he sees the first chink. His lips move, and he blinks as he swings. Freeze and fast forward. Another 5 years and 500 split lips. Now he stands every time under his father's fist. His heart has grown harder now, much like his frame, and his anger is feeding a much fiercer flame. And the blame and disdain for the pain he's endured makes pure hatred and rage replace fear in his pores. His mother again just embraces the floor, for the tears that once came make her face shine no more. She gave up that fight. To stop him cost a price, and she cashed in those checks for red necks and black eyes. Now she lies down each time, tearless and silent, as the whiskey and lines make him fearlessly violent. He turns to the stairs like he's on autopilot, to where the sun waits, standing eerily quiet. Because the sun stands with plans playing out in his mind, as he tightens his hands into fists at his side. That anger he harbors is too hard to hide, so he steadies his mind and prepares for a fight. But all he can hear is his heart in his ears as his father's foul frame causes creaks on the stairs, and all he can feel is this gathering fear as his father prepares to bring pain and despair. He stares at the door as the floor outside squeaks. He's been building up courage to do this for weeks. He can't let these beatings repeat and repeat. But now the time's come, the doubt comes in streaks. The noise outside pauses. The door seems so far. He's poised for the noise when the door swings ajar, but the door doesn't move. And doubt hits him hard. And then it slowly swings open and the chaos just starts. Before he can, the chaos just starts, before he's realized, before he can think, before his old man can come land one on him, his feet are in motion, his body's twisting, and he swings and he hits his dad straight on the chin. The next thing he knew, his dad flew as he stared with his eyes full of fear, his hand clutching at air. But he thought, this is just. This is what's fair. And he watched without care as he fell down the stairs. Now the feeling that followed was empty and hollow. He swallowed and stepped where his dad had just been. And he looked down to the ground where he lay without sound, but just smiled and blinked before his eyes lost their gleam. Yeah, that poem's been really profoundly powerful. Thank you. And connected me with a few people. And it was kind of like a springboard as well to make me realize, okay, there's really something here. You know, there's a connection, a powerful, meaningful connection with people who have been through this. And there's a way for me to express myself. And it just kind of went on from there as people connected from the story, and it grew. I started to get invited to perform at places, at recovery festivals. I mean, I've been in recovery for 17 years, and I've been clean, totally drink and drug free now for 2 years, but I had lots of spates, thank you, lots of spates of getting clean and relapsing. Such is the pattern of recovery. It's a muscle that you have to build up. It takes time. It really takes time to work on. But as I was going to these festivals and performing, more and more people were mentioning it, and I was getting invited to more things, until I got asked by like the parish council eventually to come and give my lived experience in a trauma care workshop. And that sort of spread out into more and more work. And I used to have real, you know, and I still get it now. And I'm sure anyone who does performance, that imposter syndrome, like, what value can you be getting from this? This is just my life. I'm just telling you about my life and doing poetry, which I love doing anyway. But people just started booking me and saying, look, we really want to hear your story. We want you for personal development days, for people who work with troubled kids. We want you for trauma care workshops. And it dawned on me only recently. I'm currently training to be a counselor because I've always had that desire to help people. I trained as a peer mentor a while before Maria Bonacorsi there was doing the peer mentor course, because I wanted to help people. I even became a fireman for a couple of years as well, but that's a totally different story. That desire to help people was always there. And when I became a counselor, I had to learn about these things. I had to learn about myself, something which I've been doing for a long time anyway, but it really organized a lot of these things for me, a lot of these theories. I could start applying them to why these behaviors happened, to my feelings. And I think that's what's resonated with people, that when I done these webinars, when I started them and the trauma care workshops, I always engaged with my feelings, and I told people like how I was feeling at the time, that I was angry at my dad and I wanted to kill him. And that's where this poem came from. And I was so angry, I didn't know where to put that anger, and I was so scared of him, that anger went inwards. And that's why I became an addict, because I was trying to kill myself, essentially. Being able to share those things, I think, has given people valuable insight. And all of that really has come largely through the poetry, you know, and it's come from me, but that's been a really, really powerful and important way for me to express myself, without a doubt. And yeah, like I say, becoming a counselor now is kind of a huge deal. It's very difficult, I won't lie. I'm having to look at all this stuff that is really difficult to look at again, but it's totally worth it. And I'd like to do another quick poem, if that's okay. I won't take up too much time. I see there's a few more people here. This one's quite short. This is a poem that I wrote as well, and it's about suicide, which is something, you know, I do a lot of fun poems, but I do a lot that I think are important to talk about addiction, about abuse, about suicide, because without talking about these things, that we can't fully heal them. We can't make people feel accepted if we don't talk about them. So I've always believed it's incredibly important to, and using my poetry for that is it's an honor as well to be able to do that. It really is. Yeah, this poem is called There Is He. You know, I'd lost friends to suicide. I think when you get to a certain age, everybody in one way or another is affected by suicide, and it's so terrible, it's so awful. But I kind of wanted to write this poem in a way that brought some hope as well. I wanted to have an ending, a resolution for this character, and like putting narrative into some of my poems, stories to them. I love stories as well. It's been a part of the way that I work. I think I quite like putting narrative in. A lot of them I just do for fun, but if I can get a narrative in there, I enjoy that. Yeah, I'll do the poem. It's called There Is He. There is a man sitting still. He's skinny and cold. In one hand he has pills, in the other he holds ice cold vodka. His will is to kill his sorrow. All he must do is fill his mouth and swallow, but he's frightened. His heart pounds, his throat tightens. He just wants to part from this darkness inside him. So he glugs down the bottle and pills, and he stands and just stares at his hands as his mind starts rewinding. He's a boy running round. He's young and he's happy. He likes to have fun, but his parents are snappy. To some he seems stung because his tongue he keeps held, because he learnt that it stung when he first felt the belt. So he steadies his tears and he holds back his tongue. It's the first thing of many which picked him undone. Then one day, whilst at home, having been left alone, he dreams of the things he could be when he's grown. He's a teen, running hard from the arms of the law. His whole driving force is making money to score. It's his way, earning cash day to day. It's been all he had since he was taken away from his parents. He's scared and he daren't look back. It's the chains of the law or the chains of the smack. So he runs that bit harder till he's sure that he's free. Then his mind pictures scenes of a time when he's clean. He's a junkie, He's sick in his heart and his mind. He's no loved ones or friends because he left them behind for his high. Now all his designs are focused on putting drugs through his main line, but he's dying, keeps crying. He's dying inside. It's like his whole life's conspiring against him to die, and the pain, it keeps piling high. So he grabs the bottle and pills and sits down, ready to die. There's an old man, relaxed, looking back on his life. He is thankful each night that he even survived. There was a time when he was striving to die. He even gave it a try and he barely survived. When he woke up that night beneath hospital lights, it gave him the fright which kick-started his fight, his resurgence, emergence from the dark to the light. Sometimes he thinks back and smiles on that day when he died. There is a man sitting still. He's skinny and cold. In one hand, he has pills. In the other, he holds ice cold vodka. Thank you very much.
Whoa. Jody. Hold on, I'm trying to unmute. That was amazing, Jody. As always, thank you. And I think, you know, what you've managed to do is become an artist. Rather, you know, I've worked a lot over the years with people that have written poems about their addictions, and it's important to them because it's part of it's, as you say, it's part of their recovery. I think that what is so special about you is, if I can make a sort of public compliment here, if I'm allowed, is that you've gone beyond that and now expresses, it sort of expresses for everybody, you know, loads of people that have been in your position or positions like it, and so it's not, you know, it's come beyond, it's gone beyond you now, and you know you are an artist, you are a poet, a writer, and I think a huge round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Right. If I disappear off screen for a minute, I'm still listening, but I can smell my cooking pot drying out, and I don't want it at the end of the program to be just a mass of gunge, burnt gunge on the bottom of the saucepan. However, because I've got a minute between this and a workshop, and I intended to eat, but I think I might have miscalculated a little. But right now, I want to go to someone who actually, there's two people on here that have become my memory cells in different situations. One is Jody, who reminds me of everything when I'm in the workshops, and the other is David Thompson, who actually reminds me of the whole program for the week. When I at the end of the program, I shall rattle through what's coming up in the schedule, and David will tell me what I've missed. But he's also becoming a great storyteller, as a storyteller, and it's from a very special place. And so, David's in Shropshire, but he's ably assisted. I say assisted, but it's more like a duet. I like to think of it as being a duet by Jackie Ross up in Scotland. So, David, I'm sure you will be starting, but you will do your duet with Jackie. So, so I'm handing over to you. Could you please put your hands together for David Thompson and Jackie Ross?
That we as the cat or do we la maintain.
I'm sorry.
La maintain.
So last week, David, yeah.
That I love that doing.
Okay. So after last week, you wrote a story.
of that made it out.
Tell me that again. Are we going to tell the story now? I'm
They what I did it with boy.
There was once a disabled boy.
What that it do? I ordered for that. Oh, hello. Be I thought it that look.
One day he was in school and another boy said, "Oh, hello, Bernie. Are you eating your dinner?"
It malo. No it that.
Well, it's my dinner now. Give it to me.
So that did it for the people in love.
So the disabled boy gave the big boy his lunch.
But that I don't know what is the working out what the but for I lay down.
He felt very sad and didn't know what to do. He walked home and went to his bedroom and lay down.
Is that not do it order to the and okay not do.
Next, his dad knocks on his door and says, "Everything okay, son?"
The boy I rebar.
The boy lies. "Yes," he replied.
Matter got what boy do. You know the possible we be there what the boy in.
Next day, he got ready for school. He knows the bully boy will be there waiting for him.
It do know what the book in now it will be what
He doesn't know what will happen, but he knows he will be waiting.
where it the the body the eye but working where like the uh the
When he gets to school, the bully says, "Hey, Bernie," and walks away laughing. This goes on all day.
what the about to what good like but all the the what all the no.
One day, the boy doesn't want to go to school. He is lying in bed all day. He doesn't sleep well all day or night.
That is the ball in my why is the God
The teacher phones his mum and asks why he didn't go to school.
in the adult, but where is the
His mum says, sorry, but what is happening at school?
that is that is not no but is the what about
The teacher doesn't know, but his mum and his teacher are worried about his mental health.
man that mommy it be both that it get the
Mum suggests that maybe he's being bullied while in the care of the school.
that did that I got that the that but leave the
The teacher says sorry, and the bully leaves the school.
that did it but mother get better.
The disabled boy's mental health gets better. And I think David wanted to say that for him, it's really important that disabled people are represented in stories. Is that right, David? And I think
I need to go.
you need to go.
Bye.
Bye, David.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for giving David a voice. I think stories are really important for him. He has a real passion for storytelling, and I think it really helps him to understand the world a bit better and communicate with people. So thank you for listening. You're muted, John.
You're muted, John.
You're still muted, John.
You're muted, John.
Yeah, that's Jodie's job. We've had so much tonight from experience. I mean, it's brilliant, and that's partly what I'm liking about these two Monday nights is we're having people who are bringing the arts into their practice from their experience and practitioners and all and people just but and also people who just write about everything, and there are no boundaries to what you can write about. And the next person I want to bring on is one. I mean, there are also no boundaries to what form things take. I never know whether he's going to do a song or a story, or in this case, it's a recitation. So please, can you put your hands together from Camby Antrim, Colin Owen? I'd love to say, oh, I nearly shouted at you, you're muted. I was waiting to see that to someone.
That close. John, you inspired me to maybe tell this recitation. You called them a story poem. I've never heard that expression before. You called yours a story poem yesterday. We call them recitations here. It's a big thing in this part of Ireland, actually. They're big tradition of it. However, I'm seriously inspired to change tack and do something different. I have a story that I haven't told anybody before. It's a very personal one, and while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to tell you something. When I was a young fella in this wee village here, where I live, and you still hear people saying it, there's not the same characters anymore. Used to be there were lots of characters. There were 5 pubs in the village, and every time you went into a village, there were 10 characters in each pub, you know. And when we were young, we used to go into the pubs and just watch these older characters. They were all usually older men, usually single, never married, bachelor men, and they drank a lot. And it wasn't until I got much older and started writing poems and songs and so on that I realized that these men, for character, read mental health issues. They had all kinds of issues, and the drinking was how they kind of that was their coping mechanism, you know. We thought they were funny because they were quite humorous men often, or they did stupid things and silly things, and we laughed at them and we thought it was entertaining. I'll give you an example of one that just came into my head there this afternoon. He was a real character, drank, very hard-working man, but he drank every weekend, Friday night, Saturday night, all day Sunday, sometimes a Monday as well, all of his adult life. And but he used to go off, it's Lent now, and he used to go off the drink every Lent, and it was well known that he did this, and he was religious about it, you know, Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday. And he wouldn't have even, which is the tradition here in Ireland, he wouldn't have even broken that Lenten fast on St. Patrick's Day. But this year, it was only a year or two before he died, and it was getting harder and harder, obviously, as the drink took a bigger and bigger hold on him. And a couple of days before Easter Sunday, he was coming staggering down the street, and the priest came round the corner just at the same time, and he said, John, you've fallen off the wagon, you've broken your Lenten vows. And he said, yes, Father, I have indeed. And he said, you know, our Lord fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. John says, that's right, he did, Father, but he only had to do it the once. And these are the sorts of things that these old characters used to make us laugh about, and we didn't realize how they were suffering and what their mental health was like. And it's only now that I write songs and poems and stories and so on that I realize how much of that I include in my stories and poems and so on. And it kind of does two things. It makes me understand what that was all about, what was going on with these people, and how they had backgrounds and upbringings that had caused this adult behavior. But when I tell them, then it also kind of lets other people understand. It gives them an insight into this world. And I think I'm going to go back to my original, John. I was contemplating that other story, but I'm going to hold that for another time. I'm going to tell you, because there was another category of character in the village. There was the guys who were in the pub every Friday and Saturday night and drank lots and were quite humorous. And then there were the eccentrics, as they were often referred to. Just the guys who didn't fit, the square peg in a round hole, people who just didn't fit in. And they were characters too in their own right. And very often now, when I think about it and when I look at them and I study their lives and so on, you realize that there was obviously something going on with these people as well. And I'm going to give you a wee recitation about one, and it's called Cuileann Ban, which in Gaelic means white collar. A runner in he was to our town land, and the neighbours said he was daft. And some of them even whispered he dabbled at witchcraft. And they scared themselves with stories about the bogeyman. He lived in a house beside the moss where a brown burn ran. Now, Cullen Ban was a rare boy, it's only fair to say, but in the most delightful and soul-enriching way. A man of many insights, as far as a mind could see. He knew the song of every bird and the name of every tree. He knew each and every star, and he watched them through a glass. He didn't care if the neighbours thought there was wiser eating grass. He talked about Cassiopeia and the Pleiades and Gemini. And Gemini. He said the greatest show on earth was a clear night sky. He was a man of the countryside, devoted from the first, a son of Mother Nature for knowledge and unquenchable thirst. The dawn chorus was music to his ears. He found drama everywhere when he watched a falcon stooping or a plover clap the air. He took delight in the fox cubs rolling around their den, and a tragedy in his book was a pack of hunting men. He used to take in orphans and strays and waifs of every kind. There were badgers and hares and jackdaws, and once an owl that was blind. Caterpillars and tadpoles, the miracle to observe, stood on a shelf by the window, his curiosity to serve. He thought spiders and beetles the most mesmerizing of all, and the way he let them crawl up his arm made my skin crawl. He could lift a trout from the river with nothing more than his hand, but he couldn't bring himself to fry the wee thing, he said, in the pan. And he lived on soda bread and eggs, and the hens he kept them for were better fed than he was, and they laid in his kitchen drawer. And he collected things like a magpie. Everything caught his eye. He had fossils and rocks that sparkled, treasures no money could buy. He had stones the shape of an arrow, some boy made from a flint. I forget how many thousands of years, he said, since they were spent. He had wee birds' nests and seashells, and even the skull of a crow, and a thing he called a meteorite, he said he found in the snow. The stuff that man had, he could have opened a county museum, but I was one of the very few that ever went to see him. Oh, he was a real eccentric in every sense of the word. In all my life, before or since, the likes I never heard. He told wonderful stories written by old dead Greeks. He never told the same one twice. And he never told the same one twice. And I called every week. I heard about Finn McCool and his deerhounds, Bran and Scolong, and the yarns about banshees and fairies left me feared to walk home. Aye, Cullen Ban was a rare one. Of that there can be no doubt. But every man has a shadow. In that he can't be left out. You see, once a year in May, he fell into an old dark humour. He said he mourned a loved one, let it be truth or rumour. And for a week he never ate nor drunk except for his homemade wine. And dreary it was to see him, not sitting up on cloud nine. He lost his sense of wonder. He became a different man, just sat there day after day with sore head in his hands. But sooner or later, the weather always loses its grip. Ask any old farming man or the captain of any ship. Cullen Ban would soon get up and tend as honeybee hives and starting taking interest again in the wee creatures' lives. And then you'd see him out walking with a switch of grass in his mouth and his head up and his eyes closed and his face turned to the south. And then one year he vanished like a corncrake. He never came back. The neighbours just nodded agreement. Cullenban was bound to crack. They searched for him high up and low in every hole in the moss, and they quizzed me and everyone they happened to come across. And of Cullenban they found no trace, and I never told on him. They probably think he's lying somewhere, the rig of a skeleton. And God only knows, but maybe by now that could be the case. But when I hear the folk talking, it's hard to keep a straight face. When they say, oh, he was away with the fairies, I just have to laugh. For them very same folk had the chance to say Cullenban was daft. I never bat an eyelid when they say, he must have drowned in the sea. For I don't want to let slip the secret he entrusted to me. His house of curiosities are gathering dust where they sit. On a letter he left in the dresser, he gifted me every bit. But I haven't the heart for changes. I watch for him in the lane. I know I'm wasting my time, but I keep watch just the same. And whiles I imagine him walking on a lonely western strand, and the whole bloody world to himself and miles of sand. But now I think I'll be quiet in case I give Cullenban away. Maybe I will sometime, but forgive me, it won't be today.
Colin, as always, you take us away, and just that two-side, I mean, everything, it fitted perfectly into tonight.
Thanks, John.
Now,
That's it. Cullenban's a kind of composite of 2 or 3 guys, but they're all in there.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. Now we're gonna slip across to Canada, because I know Norman just has enormous amounts of experiences, and is bound to have a story for us. And then we're going to finish our last contributor. I think we have contributors tonight. Will be Shane, and he can tell us as little or as much as he wants. Cos, it's great to see you here. Cos and I'll be working later together. But Norman, for now, we're going straight over to you in Canada.
Thank you, John. This is all very serendipitous, and that's a pun, by the way, because part of the story is in Sri Lanka, which was known as Serendip and serendipitous. But I'll start. Because of a project, I went into my archives, boxes of stuff, and I had to pull out papers and pictures and pieces of this, that, and the other thing. And now they're scattered around my table. And as I heard these stories, all of a sudden, I had my story to tell you. And first of all, I will start at pictures, because they help with my story and shorten it. I started work in 1990 at a place called the Spiral Garden, an interactive arts program for children who are undergoing therapy, treatment, etc. And this is the Spiral. And that is during our ceremony to prevent being hit by meteors that summer. And one of the things that we had was a platform called the House of Legends. And the person who is sitting there, I hope I can get this right. Can you see him? There. That's Michael Zauder. And he's sitting on a platform called the House of Legends. And below Michael Zauder is the word well. And the word well was where you picked up words and with a bucket, and then you used them to make up stories. And we traveled many places. And this is me in my earlier days when I used to be a little different. And I was wondering which story to choose to tell, because we had the children made up stories. And one of them was Sabura. And so I'll try and make this story as short as possible. We made up stories. In other words, the word well, Michael Zauder, all of the others. It was my job to be at the center of this kind of word and story storm and pull down the lightning to help the children make up stories. And it is a time that I thought I had left behind in my life, because I ended my time there in 1996. And all of a sudden, things are churning up again. So here's a story created by Sabura. Both Sabura and Michael are dead. They passed away because of their respective conditions, but their stories remain with me. And this is a story that Sabura created underneath a tree in the spiral garden, right next to that spiral that you saw in the first picture. Once there was a young man, and he had a lovely little farm at the edge of the forest, but he was lonely. Why? Because the forest was full of lions, roaring lions, fat, thin, skinny, lions that were hungry and chased him sometimes across the field, for no matter how high he built his fence, the lions could leap over them. And so nobody came to visit. Now, nobody came to his house from the village, but out of the forest one day, there came a little old lady, and she was just walking along. She had a penny whistle playing merrily away. And John was really surprised to see a little old lady. And so he called out to her, "Grandmother, Granny, you look like you've traveled a long ways. Why don't you come and have lunch? It's time for us to eat." "Well, thank you, Sonny," she said. "I would love that." And so she joined the young man in his kitchen. And when the lunch had been finished, she asked him if she could do something for him. And isn't that the way of stories? When little old ladies come out of forests full of lions, there has to be something special about them. And John said, "Well, I'm lonely. Because the forest is full of lions, nobody comes to visit." "Ah, easy enough," she said. "I'll give you a magic fiddle. Well, I don't have the fiddle, but when the sun goes down tonight, you say these magic words and the fiddle will appear. And when you pick it up, you will know how to play it. The magic works that way. And when you play it, a lion will hear the music in the forest. And as the lion hears the music, it will dance to the music. It will dance to your farm. And while the lion is dancing, you must cut off 12 pieces of the lion's mane. Now, you must do this before midnight, because at midnight, the fiddle disappears and, well, the lion won't be in the power of the music. And when it disappears, you better have 12 pieces of the lion's mane, because then it will be your friend." Well, John thanked the old woman, and she walked out of this story and walked into the next. And that night, as the sun was setting red, gold, and yellow, he said the magic words, and a warm breeze came through the open door, and a golden fiddle appeared on his kitchen table. He picked it up immediately, and he began to play. Oh, it was so wonderful music that he was playing, and the music was heard by a lion. The lion danced out of the forest, across the field, into his yard, and into his kitchen. There was John dancing, fiddling away. The lion was dancing away. And then John remembered he'd forgotten to get some scissors. And when he stopped playing, the lion chased him around the table 3 times. And so he had to start playing again. Well, John watched the clock going tick, tick, tick towards midnight. And neighbor after neighbor heard the music. They came to ask, "John, Are you holding a party? But as soon as they saw the lion, they screamed and they slammed the door and they ran away. And it was 3 minutes to midnight when suddenly there came a knock, knock, knock at the door, as if a little child was at the door. And he heard a voice, John, I heard the music. Are you having a party? And John was about to call out because he recognized that voice. It was a little girl named Sabura. And if the lion saw her and the fiddle disappeared, why, it would eat them both. But the door opened before he could say anything. And when Sabura saw the lion, she didn't scream or run away. She said, oh, John, you've got a lion dancing in your kitchen. How wonderful. How wonderful. Yes, said John, and over there are some scissors. And could you get those scissors? And could you snip off 12 pieces of the lion's mane? And you got to do it before midnight. Well, and she said, sure, I can do that, but play something slow. And so John began to fiddle slow and low, and the lion began to sway back and forth. And little Sabura reached up and looked into the great golden eyes of the lion and said, this won't hurt a bit. And she went snip, boom, snip, boom, snip, boom, and 12 snips and 12 bongs later, it was midnight. And the fiddle turned into a golden mist and blew away. But now the farmer was the friend of the lions, and the lions were the friends of the farmers. And so the lion looked at the little girl and she said, boo, shoo. And the lion shook itself and ran into the forest where it had a story to tell the other lions. And now John says, oof, I've got the mane of a lion. Oh, what do you mean, said Sabura. You mean I've got the mane of a lion. And she took the pieces of the lion's mane and she made a little pillow out of it. And then she slept with her head on the pillow and she dreamt all that night. She dreamt all the night that the forest was full of music and dancing lions, and that she, Sabura, was dancing with the lions. And that would be more or less the end of my story. But there's a longer piece tacked on to a journey across the oceans to another garden called the Butterfly Peace Garden, and another little girl who banged at a great gate and asked to be let in. But that's a story to be told another time. Thank you.
Norman, like Colin, you never fail to you never disappoint. You never fail to entertain us, and that was just beautiful. Now I'm quite unashamedly going to exploit a friend of mine because he had no idea that I was going to ask him to do anything. He just turned up in the audience and sat there, and like if we'd been in a field, he could have wandered into my tent, and I'll say, you wandered in at the right time, so like it's time to tell us a story. And and I know a little bit about Shane, and I know about his work, and I know a little bit about his life. I think I was part of the corruption, and so Shane, and I mean Shane does some wonderful work with young people, and I think it would just be nice to finish nice. Yeah, my English teacher would have given me a slap for using nice. It'd be great. It'd be fantastic. It'd be amazing if we finished with hope and etc. etc. And I know some of the people you work with definitely have issues, Shane. So, but I've heard you tell stories about what you do with them. So, and maybe you can give us a story once you've done that that you would use with them. So I'm going to shut up and let Shane. And after Shane, if we can all unmute and have a bit of a natter.
Thanks,
Shane. Over to you.
Thanks. Well, that was great, Norman. By the way, that was it's just the sort of story that I love, actually, and would love to tell it to children. It's just such a wonderful story. But I'm really well, I'm struck by what everyone has been saying tonight, actually, and the bits of themselves and the stories of the poetry. Very struck by what Jodie said, indeed. And you know, I'm kind of, we're sort of saying, revealing a little bit about ourselves. You know, well, I was in denial for most of my life that I probably had a mental health problem. I just didn't realize. I just thought my destructive behavior was just what you did. And you know, I've had a long journey sort of sorting that stuff out as much as you can and all the rest of it. And I'm just trying to think of how to sort of say this without sort of getting too deep. But I often say, and I know I shouldn't say this about myself, but I often say that I was a failed artist because I had this creativity in me, and I could never really put it anywhere. So I did other things, but I could never really get this creative art together. I just didn't know how to do it. I left school at 15, no qualifications and all that kind of stuff. And I trained in my 30s and ended up being a counsellor, actually, Jackie, for part of what I do. And just to pull John into it, you know, it was in the 90s, the mid 90s, I think, thereabouts. I went to this thing in the woods, or in the park, actually, there's a little wooded area in the park, with my two girls at the time. And I came around the corner and there was this odd man in brightly coloured clothing with a top hat, sitting on a stump, and he was telling fairy stories. And we stopped. Now, I probably enjoyed it more than my girls did. Well, no, we all enjoyed it, but because I'm just a kid inside. And I think that's part of a bit, maybe to what Jodie was talking about. I lost my dad when I was 21, and we had a difficult relationship. It was never resolved. And there's a bit of the child that's always been in me. And this, watching John just spoke to me that day. And it's just like, wow, I didn't know this was a thing. And I just thought, I would love to do that. But it was a lot of years before I did it, actually, because I don't want to go into all the complications of life and blah, blah, blah. But the seed was sown that day by John Rowe. It really, I didn't know it was a thing. I loved stories as a kid. That was my escape. I didn't know you could do it to people in that way. And John showed me it, and it stayed in my brain for years until I had a real epiphany moment in a wood. I was doing an ecotherapy day, and we were doing like a meditation, and it just sort of came into my head, and I just thought, you need to be telling stories, Shane. You've just got to tell stories. Now, a lot of people don't believe that I was very shy when I was young. They think I'm a really confident bloke with a big beard and all this kind of, and I can speak up for myself really well these days and all the rest of it. There's not many things that will intimidate me, but I was actually a very shy boy, and a lot of things intimidate. And I am mindful of that when I tell stories to children and stuff. And so I took myself to learn how to tell stories professionally. I went to Emerson, and then I began to sort of do it. And I just want to tell you about two little things that I've done that are really, so when I was asked to, I'm just looking at my little notes that I made here. So I was asked to do some storytelling in a psychiatric unit for teenagers. It was a residential hospital for teenagers with severe mental health problems. And they said, would you run a workshop as well? Because they want to learn how to do stories and maybe film it and stuff. And I said, well, I can give them about how stories, the structure that you need for the story and everything. And I said, and they said, would you tell some stories too? And I said, yes, I will. And there was only a few of them there, a few of these teenagers. And one lad came in, really tall lad, about 18, with a peaked cap pulled right down. And I could just see, he just sort of looked at me slightly, sort of underneath that peak. He just sort of, one little eye looked at me, and he sat down, and he sort of sat like this, you know. And I was just telling this story. And as I was telling the story, it was just this kind of, and then he sat back, and then he took his peaked hat off, and then he just sat there, just listening to me. And it was just amazing, the change of his character, from this very shy, very, very shy boy, young man, 17, 18, and this opening of his body. And as a therapist, you know, I could see what was going on there, this openness, that he felt open to me, you know. And so that's one memory that I really have that's really strong and really, just so a wonderful thing for me to happen, that I was a part of that. And the other bit I did is more recent, actually. Last year, it was last year, just before the lockdown, actually. I was asked to do a week in a school just out in Suffolk, in the countryside. I come from Suffolk originally. I live in Essex now for my sins. And it was a little village school in part of Suffolk and outside Bury St Edmunds. And it was a whole week of working with children's mental health, infant children. And a woman asked me to do it. I didn't know this. She'd saw me storytell somewhere. And then she came to my club night a couple of times. And then she told me, she stalked me on Facebook for quite a while before she approached me and said, would you come and do this project for me and do storytelling as the base of the project about mental health? Because her daughter had, she won't mind me saying this, her daughter had tried to take her life, basically. And it shocked the family. And she had this love of story. So I put together this program, this workshop for the school, and it was called, that they get the woman who I did the project for, she gave me the title of Find Your Brave. So I worked on some stories. Paul Jackson gave me a wonderful story to use too. And I worked with I think it was 4 or 5 classes for the whole week with story. And I used one story as the main piece that we worked on. And we got them drawing, we got them acting. I took them outside on the playground and got them acting as being the old woman or the monster or the silly boy or just loads of acting. And what I found was, what I did is, because I was very shy as a child and really insecure and didn't want to do things because of I didn't want anybody to see me. I just thought I have to be really sort of quite loose with this and invite people. But I do story rounds with children quite a lot, actually, when I work with children now in groups. But the way I do it is we just pass it around. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, just let it pass on, you know. So it's the children that were like me, really shy, they don't have to say anything at all. But I trust the process of storytelling and the fun, because I like to have lots of fun when I tell to children, and I'm really silly. And I trust the process of just going round and round. And what I've found every time, sometimes I need a little bit of encouragement. I need to encourage the child a little bit. But every time that really quiet, shy child begins to speak and begins to add bits to the story, every single time it happens. And I just love the fact, sorry, I've just switched myself off. Just bear with me for a second. I'll just come back in. I can't see anything on the screen. Bear with me, people. Technical, there we are, we're back. And I think I have this exuberance, which might intimidate some children, but I think because I give you permission to be as silly as you want. And I think that encourages the children that are a bit more shy to join in. And Norman was talking about, I think it was Norman, talked about making up a story. Well, I always do an improvised story, which I got from Justine Demir, the idea of improvising the story in the moment with children. She sort of showed me how to do that. And I do it every time I do a workshop now with children. I do an improvised story. They give me all the ingredients. So they give you farting and poo and bogies, and they don't believe that I'll put them in the story, but I do, in really big detail. So it'll be a really big, juicy bogey. How can I put it on? And so I get really over the top with it, and they just roar with laughter. And it just gives permission, basically. So I'm telling you all that. I'm looking at my notes again. So I'm telling you all that kind of. I will tell a tiny little story right at the end. It's my shortest story. It takes about a minute and a half. But I want to get back to my mental health, because I lost a brother about 7 years ago now in very, very difficult circumstances. I normally can't talk about it, but the last year or two I can talk about it a bit more. And it was immensely traumatic for me, immensely traumatic. And I actually believe that storytelling saved my mental health from really going off the scale, basically. And I was at an event. I don't often talk about my mental health. I don't normally talk about my mental health. But I was at an event 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a mental health event. And they invited people to come up, and I told some stories. And they invited people to come up and just say something in their real personage. And I thought, shall I? And my brain was going, no, don't. And I just thought, but you have to, Shane, because everyone thinks you're this certain person. So I got up and I did this thing where I was 2 characters. One is this Shane, who's fun and laughing and silly. And then I did the more serious Shane, who has a bit of a mental health problem. And I stepped into each character as one's a character. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I'm analysing myself as I'm talking here. Are they characters or are they me? Well, they are me. But I often keep the mental health side of me as a separate thing, and I don't acknowledge him in front of people. But I actually brought him onto the stage that time, and he spoke. He didn't speak very much, but he just said, I have a lot of fun. I enjoy a lot of things, but some days are a real struggle for me. But storytelling saved me. It really has saved me, because it's my art now. And I think art is a great savior of people. If you can do some form of art, whatever it is, I think it's fantastic for your mental health. So I've jabbered a bit more than I thought I would, actually. But so there's a little story that I'm realised there's time and everything. There's a little story I just want to share, and it's, if anyone says, "Have you got a little story, Shane?" I go, "Well, I've got a really little story." But it starts with a real story. So my youngest daughter lives in Devon, and I haven't seen her for a little while, actually, but I used to go and see her every fortnight. I used to go down and stay in a camper van and go and see her and stuff. And I had a bit of free time one morning, and I went to a beach near Sidmouth, and there'd been a storm overnight. This is a true story. There'd been a storm overnight, and I went on the beach, and the beach was covered in thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish. They'd all been in a huge waves, I guess, all been dumped on the beach, and they couldn't get back into the sea, and they were dead or dying, basically. And it was as far as you could see along the beach. Just, I've never seen so many starfish in all my life. And there was a little girl that came walking along the beach, looking at the starfish. And she saw one, and she picked it up, and it was just moving a little bit. And she cupped it into her hands, and she walked down to where the sea was just ebbing on the sand there, and she just put it into the sea, and the starfish just went off into the sea. There were two gnarly old fishermen walking along, saw what she was doing. "Yeah, don't want to bother about that little girl. There's no point." And she turned and she looked at them and she said, "Well, that little starfish didn't think so." That's my story.
Shane, that was wonderful. Thank you. And I said you were going to be the last, but the trouble with stories and poems is someone says something and that reminds you of something. And so I'm going to finish on a really quick poem before we all have a natter. I was in Texas, and there was a local high school. A kid had died of an overdose, and they were planting a tree, and they said, it was the kids asked me to come down and said, would I do a poem? Would I write something? And I thought, this is sort of difficult. And so this is what I wrote for the thing. It's called Find Your Art. It's all there, inside each of us. That connection between ourselves and our art. And when the television gets really boring and it's time to escape, that's when you go for it. Out in the street, in full view of your friends, or quietly, in secret. It doesn't much matter as long as you're easy with yourself. This ain't no Walton Mountain thing, and a few of us will walk around with John Boy's novel ringing in our ears, and it's not always nice. But the price is good, and the feeling's even better when you look at that poem, picture, sculpture, or play your music, or even when you go back out over that conversation when everyone was listening to you, or when you danced till your legs wouldn't work anymore. And you think to yourself, I did this. It's all mine. And there's not a teacher or a parent or a so-called friend who can take that away from you. And no amount of powder or alcohol or straight poison will ever give you that.
Lovely, John.
Hey, lovely.
Well, so please unmute yourselves, and I mean, we've covered so much ground tonight. Maria, thank you for the start, and David and Jody and Colin and Norman and Shane, you're all magnificent. Kerry, nice to see you actually on the screen. Kerry was our star last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really nice to listen to those stories today, and people don't talk about their mental health very much. I totally understand that speaking out, it saves lives, and that's you talking, so I can totally relate to the stories that are coming forward, and it's so eloquently put here in these Monday night specials for me now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Kerry, I'm gonna use you as a foil to advertise Maria, because I know you love Maria's stories. And on Saturday night or 6 o'clock, Maria will be our star, and she's got the evening together with a friend of hers.
Whoa.
Sunday night.
Saturday.
It's Sunday night. Yeah. I'll go through.
Saturday.
What, Jackie?
Sorry, David, can you say that again?
Like you said, Saturday night, John.
Ah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I did. No, Saturday night is something totally different. In fact, there's a play on Saturday night called where we've rewritten the Mark Twain's $1 million pound note, and which was a short story which Changing Places was based on, and we've rewritten it just in modern times, just as Pete come out of a pandemic. Or actually, there's about 16 people. It's been written by committee, and we're doing it. Cos is helping us, and Jody's going to be in it, and and we've rewritten it, and we're reading it from scripts, like you see the films of the Goonies reading their things, and we'll have sound effects and stuff. So that's on Saturday night. Thank you, David. You always correct me. Magnificent. And so it's going to be 8 o'clock on Saturday night, but Sunday night, Kerry, is Maria's stories, and
that's it. Myself and Kathy Carson. So, I have loved last Monday and today, and what a gift to have a platform like this to talk about the medicine of the arts, including stories, and the red thread of stories. A lot of people tonight even said, I didn't mean to tell that one, or I'd like to not tell that now and I'll tell this instead, because the red thread of story is so strong when you're talking about these types of stories, and it's like the ripple. So, as Kerry said, and a lot of other people, Jody said it as well, and there were so many people said tonight that it's important to give voice, and sometimes it can feel like unsayable things, but when you put them in a story or you put them in a poem, you render them safe, and it doesn't even have to be your story, but it can resonate so strongly with you that it feels like your story. And when you tell a story like that, a resonating story like Jody did, then the overwhelm of the audience saying, that's my story too, can feel in the beginning, because we all tell ourselves the universal lie that I'm the only one that's ever traveled this road. But when you realize that other people have traveled those same stones have stuck into their toes, there's a real comfort in that, but there's also resistance to letting go of that it's your road,
now, if I don't mention what another couple of things which actually fit totally into that, tomorrow night with our young tellers at 5 o'clock, we've got people from and a lot of people places where it's very difficult for them to tell their story, like we have kids from Gaza, and that just and it's a way of connecting with the world. And I think that connection. And on Wednesday, because if I don't mention this, I'm going to get a slap off David. I'm just glad his fist can't come through the screen and just give me a slap. There's we've got Paro Anand, and she's reading the last part of her novel, or Nomad's Land, where, and it's a novel for young people, but it's about displaced people, and she's invented a fictitious tribe, but it's like it just takes in all those displaced people's experience, and that's brilliant. And so I'll slap in Fridays as well. You know, Nick Toxic doing children's poems. Right. Anyone else want to throw something, a comment in the pot?
Well, you all know what Maria Gillan is like, but I'm sure most people here probably won't have heard Kathy Carson, but you're in for a treat, Maria. I am sure will tell you. She's fabulous.
She's just brilliant. She's a class human being and works in the front line as we speak, you know, but also with, tenderness. She tells her own story and gives permission for other people to thread onto it and to resonate with it. And she reminds me in style very much of Jodie. So I could see Jodie and Kathy having like a poetry slam, and she's done poetry slams, you know. So if you'd like to come along, Jodie, I think you'd have answering red threads for the stories that Kathy's going to tell, you know, and it would be lovely to see that. So we have space. We can make room if you want to come and join in on Sunday.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, I will. So what time is it on Sunday?
It's also 6 o'clock, isn't it, John?
6 o'clock.
It is 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same place.
I thought I'd better double check.
Yeah, same place. It's all it's always this same way in. You know, there's stuff on
very handy.
About 4 nights a week, 4 or 5 days a week. We're just a busy cafe.
Good.
David's going to tell me something I've missed.
No. That was one message that it really important. What is the that doing that not got the business or the other button. My goal is let all the business, but it is okay. It is okay to have be doing something. So what I did that lot at made doing something.
Including you, Dave. Including you.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
It was a great night.
Yeah.
A lot did the business. I know I am doing it. Baby, other to be doing that. At the bottom, I believe at the bottom, God doing.
You believe everybody's got stories. True. And on that note, David, we on that note, we've got to go because I've got to give Ali 2 minutes rest before he comes host of my next workshop. And I was thinking about having a bite in this 20 minutes because I'm back on at 8. So, thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. You went away before you got your applause today, but we loved your duet with Jackie, and what we were saying was great. That last week's session, sort of inspired you to write a story for this week. So you missed your applause. I will give you a round of applause now. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Jody, Maria, Colin, Norman, Shane, thank you very much. And I don't know what the subject will be next Monday. I haven't thought about it, but come along. You're all whatever I throw at you, you're all up to jumping in anyway. So.
Magic Mondays.
Bye,
Bye
guys.
all.
Bye.
Thank you, Ali. See you in I'll see you in about 10 minutes actually.
Yeah, see you in a bit.
Cheers.
I'm just I'm gonna leave and come back on, Ali. I'll just stay, shall I? And leave me up. Ali, are you still around? Should we just leave it up and let's start letting people in 10 minutes? Hi, Cos. I've got to get Ali to stop streaming this live before we start.
Oh, shall I go off again?
No, you're okay.
Oh, okay, cool.
Um,
And then we'll start up again, yeah? Well, the others are joining us, I guess.
yeah.
2 computers set up, got the speaker set up, got the play here. All good.
So.